Welcome, everybody, to another session on listening. This one is specifically in support and celebration in exchange around this idea of the Precarious Listening project that Ali will be presenting. It comes out of this place of looking at environments in which we listen, whether that's by choice or by imposition. And so having had this open call that's been up for a few weeks where people can submit sort of versions of their stories has been a really exciting thing to watch. And so I'm really anxious to hear the examples and the framing and a bit more about the project. So thank you everybody for being here.
Ale Borea is a researcher, musician, and sound artist from Lima, Peru. Her work explores the politics of listening, sonic imaginaries, and sampling practices. She holds postgraduate studies in philosophy and has been active in Berlin's music scene since 2020, performing across various projects as a percussionist and drummer. Welcome, everyone, and
Thank you
thanks,
so
Ale,
much.
for this amazing project.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Alex. And thank you, everyone who is joining now to this session. My name is Ale. And thank you to the World Listening Project for hosting this session and for supporting this project from the beginning. I just want to share a little bit about the story of this project and of course share of some of the submissions of the contributions with a little bit of their context, because what we are discussing here is putting into the table, into the sound studies or listening studies debates, the importance of attend to other forms of listening that may be a little bit closer than we expect, that can also be really interesting for exploring situated practices as forms of connecting to their environment, inhabiting this sonic world, creating this sonic world, and also some forms of resistance and contestation to late capitalism conditions. So I just wanted to share a little bit about this project, and it all began here in this chair. While I was working as an Aufsicht, as a guard in an exhibition, in a gallery in Berlin for more than 5 years. I was surrounded by sound pieces that were looping all the way for days, months, seasons, and I couldn't escape that situation. And I felt it was an interesting context to think about listening practices, because being at the margin, at the corner of this exhibition room, I could see how people engage with art and listen to art. And at the same time, I couldn't participate in that aesthetic listening because, of course, my role was much more on the maintenance or service side. So I became really interested in all these, so to say, infrastructural listenings, that are these listenings that we assume that are normal part of everyday labor, but they are also source of pretty fertile ways of knowing, situated ways of knowing, inhabiting the space, connecting with others. And I thought this was a really interesting starting point for the project. Also because in Spanish, an art exhibition is translated most commonly as exposición de arte. So instead of exhibition, which is related to staging, showing, or putting something on display, exposición goes well with the politics of exposure, of endurance, sensory strain, and putting the body. In Spanish, we say poner el cuerpo, no? Who is carrying the sensory costs of others' listening experiences, aesthetic experiences, or daily service, or etc. So I was interested in unchosen sound that make up audible worlds and the listening practices that emerge in these work contexts. So that's where the project started taking shape, from this basic question: what happens when sound is not something one chooses to listen, but a condition of work? So the project started with a framing text. It's a bit theoretical, but pretty accessible as well. You can check it on your phone here with the QR code. It's on the World Listening Project webpage. And we also developed this open call inviting listening experiences in work context in submission forms to create a collective online archive. and a radio broadcast. We created these nice Instagram posts to call for submissions for experiences of listening at work, could be past or present, paid or unpaid. The important thing is that I believe that we all have these kind of experiences. It can be pleasurable, maybe not, but we always have been in this situation in which listening was not chosen but imposed by working condition. This was the open call at the left, and on the right was the broadcast at Radio Warm on the 1st of May, commemorating the Workers' Day. Just the last part of this introduction, the objective of this call was to share and gather listening experiences shaped by work, and the submissions took free format form. They could be field recordings, but we also received diary entries, voice notes, testimonies, even like full sound pieces, and rants and complaints, which was really entertaining. And the last thing I would like to mention before we start with this listening session properly with the audios, we don't believe that these sounds are representative samples of workers, fields, or populations. It's not a multicultural inventory of labor soundscapes. It's not an exhibition of sound for aesthetic or normative listening. And we don't claim that these sounds are sound art. We would like to share these sounds to share also how is the daily sonic world of the people who shared this experience with us and try to make it collective. So it invites a shift in listening away from the brief encounter of the visitor, customer, or audience towards the worn-out forms of attention produced by remaining with sounds behind counters, inside kitchens, in call center lines, across delivery routes, warehouse floors, and care work settings. I will start here with sharing snippets of the broadcast, which also contain fragments of the submissions. I use always the name of the pseudonym, or the name the person entered in the form. So everything is their preference. So this first is by Arcade Guy and Magno Kaliman.
Arcade Guy works in a video game arcade. Each machine has its own background music, and each one also has a louder call sound when someone passes by. When the room is full, the sound of the machines mixed with shouting, crying, jumping, celebration sounds. The boss insists that the machines remain at maximum volume because, supposedly, they create atmosphere. Here, atmosphere is a commercial decision. For the worker, it becomes a condition absorbed by the nervous system. 6 to 9 hours inside cyclical sounds, 80 to 90 decibels, minimum wage, fragile contracts, and on top of that, having another job afterwards. Next submission is is from a Brazilian artist who worked in a tourist hostel in Portugal and had to listen to a bossa nova loop for hours. He mentions this supposedly feel-good music put him in a really bad mood.
I will continue with a submission by worker and by dishwasher. I just want to point out that here we can see that it's not only the volume and the saturation and intensity what can be exhausting for the workers, but also the loop, the boredom, the constant exposure to the same song, to the same loop, creating no sense of anticipation. What we will hear next by worker, it's a testimony. It was a written testimony that I tried to give it some sonic form, and Dishwasher sent a really nice field recording.
The submission of Worker from Thuringia describes their earliest memory of involuntarily being exposed to sounds that are designed to distract, entertain, and/or numb the workers.
I was assembling chairs in a factory as work during school holidays in about 1998 and was fed with the constant sound of Antenne Thüringen, a local radio station with heavy rotation of international hits of the time. I remember deliberately choosing to have fun with it, using the patterns as timestamps, just like I did by counting repeating procedures of the work itself and calculate numbers to get over the mostly dull activity while staying focused enough to not mess up the work. I vividly remember Des'ree's Life and Aerosmith's I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. The modulation to the minor chord in the repeated choruses at the end was the only slightly out of mainstream moment of the day. And the thing that made me mentally chomp the time as if I remember it right, after 11th time hearing it, I knew the work is almost over for this day. It structured boredom and was one of many repetitive patterns. I tried to have fun with focusing on details to distract from the involuntary exposure to generic mainstream radio. It did not stress me after work immediately, but left those details embedded in my inner ear for eternity.
What happens when repetition, saturation, and constant exposure become part of the texture of time? In the back of a service kitchen, sound is part of the pace of work. Plate, water, machines, and voices overlap with the pressure of time.
No todo está perdido, dice. Todavía falta perder contra Arabia Saudita. No más.
Well, as you have noticed, probably you are probably all trained listeners. These submissions are not edited. They are absolutely raw in a way to respect the contributors and their experience and their ways of sharing these experiences. I just had to sometimes cut or shorten a little bit their submissions. But the idea is that the whole submission should be available in the online repository that we plan to upload soon on the webpage. And as we can listen here is how, for example, in the first audio, this radio broadcast or these constant songs started to become the texture of time, a way of experiencing the work shift. And also the person, in this case worker, tried to create strategies to resist or to fight this boredom or this constant exposure. So I thought this was also pretty interesting because in many of the submissions, people wrote that they, for example, hid earbuds under their hair. In my case, also myself, I leave my hair super long, and when I was working at the gallery, I hid an earplug on my left ear to listen to something else, no? And this is pretty constant. For example, when the boss walks away, they turn the volume down. There are different ways of hacking the sensory condition, no? Sensory situation in which they are exposed to sound. And as Jacob Eriksson would put it in his work about prepositional listening, it's not the same for a worker to listen to a sound than for a worker to listen against sound or despite noise, for example. So I think this relational aspect of sound, it's important to reconsider it in these contexts in which sounds are not necessarily meant to be listened by you as the worker. They sometimes create atmosphere and they are meant for others. And these are contexts in which sound displays differently and aesthetic listening is not on these registers, so to say. So that's why I wanted to keep this nature of this listening, not normative listening, not aesthetic listening, and continue listening to these submissions as daily sonic worlds from other people. The last submission of this block will be from Aux from Texas.
Sometimes what becomes unbearable is not the inarticulate noise of a machine, but a conversation one cannot leave, a phone call that goes off topic, the obligation to listen, the irrelevance because it happens inside working time.
I mean, it's just a process, like, there's a lot of information, and the only reason it's on my mind a little bit is because I recently started watching this video that I felt was so important that I got a friend to send me a transcription of it that I have to edit, and I just started. It's this guy that was a contractor for the Department of Defense, and he talks about like the technology that's actually available. As far as it's way more than quantum computers, and it's just and it's like conscious computers, and how they have a team of like scientists, neuroscientists, they target people, and it deals with the nanotech in our food. Like, this is the dark side of disclosure. So, it's a part of it because it does relate to our astrology, because some of the frequencies that we get from these energies that are in our charts, you got to remember the planets, the asteroids, the stars, all of it, these are a frequency and a harmonic, okay? So you can be affected by a variety of, like, it could be a lower harmonic or it could be a higher harmonic. It just depends on what's, it depends on a lot of factors, actually. But anyway, and some of these places, that there's bases there, and that there's military there, that they, and so then there's this Department of Defense guy who's talking about all the technology they actually use. I'm just at the very beginning of the transcript. It's a lot to unravel, but it's very relevant. Because that happens thing in Aquarius, in her birth chart, surprisingly, an Aries ascendant. Have you ever had your chart done? What I've noticed too is I would tend to attract people in my life that have some sort of opposite aspects. So it's like we're trying to balance something with the energies. It's so interesting to look at.
That is actually going to be available.
And Shara is a Leo ascendant.
Hijack
Really Gemini side.
get kicked out of here. Who knows?
Wow, that's interesting. Your birthday is really cool. That's awesome, because that's what we are. It's like,
Well, this is just part of the results of the form, which is going to be available online. I just wanted to show that there were submissions from many different fields. And this was the form in English. We had 13 responses and 7 in Spanish, so it was 20 in total. Well, you can see here that most of the people, more than half, responded that they hear this sound at work constantly. Also, kind of 50% were exposed to this sound for 6 or more hours. So it's pretty tough Well, here we have two more audios. The first one is also pretty tough. It's an experience of a migrant woman. That's her pseudonym. I will play it.
Mujer Migrante submitted an audio she sent to her partner at that time, while she was working in a restaurant.
I had panic attacks every 30 minutes during the shift. I would walk around the restaurant to avoid running into anyone. I pretended I was collecting plates or serving tables. When I had panic attacks, they would send me to the kitchen or to the storage room, where there was ice so I could put it on my wrists and neck.
I don't know if I told someone ordered something and like I needed to tell I didn't want to, but like they were like, oh, you need to talk to him, you need to talk to him. I told him. He wanted to ignore me, but then he said like, don't talk to me super aggressively. Like, don't. I don't have any other place to eat. Where do you want me to go? Don't talk to me like this.
I have many memories from that place, including sexual harassment and racism. These are experiences that are often normalized within the service sector and invisible or non-existent to customers. It is easy to start believing that you are exaggerating or to feel alone and unprotected with no one to turn for help. With this recording, someone from outside, my ex-partner, realized how violent the atmosphere was, something they had not imagined.
I think this is a really strong audio by Mujer Migrante, which also shows how in the service sector it's really easy to just perceive the experience of a brief moment when we are in this specific place in a restaurant, not knowing what happens in the kitchen, in the relationships between the people that work on those spaces. And sometimes it's also hard to see the distinctions between sensory strain and abuse, verbal abuse. When your voice is not being recognized, when you cannot speak about what bothers you, or you are just being silenced because you are a migrant woman in this case. I will continue with the next audio, which is a little bit long, and it has to do more with care work, which is an important part also of listening work.
The worker is not only the exhausted body in front of the machine, the loop, or the customer. The worker is also the person cooking, the caretaker, the person making the space livable, holding together a family through sound and silence.
The next contribution, a sound piece by Honey T, navigates memories of cooking with her parents, unfolding questions of family, bureaucracy, care work, and migration.
My parents have worked all their lives, and they still do. If you spend a lifetime working, the stillness can feel like loss, an unfamiliar silence. To stop is to risk being seen as useless. And as migrants, being seen as useless is the last thing you want people to see of you.
Ik nak tôi lần á, vậy ik richtig gemacht, vì với ik dê và entscheiden á. Thế xong bắt đầu đến lúc mà mama đi sang bên này á, thế xong rồi sang bên này thì mama lại không switch lại nhà nữa đấy. Thế xong rồi mọi người cứ cậu lúc đấy là các cậu còn sống không? Mama về lần đầu tiên, lúc đấy chỉ còn đúng một cậu còn, nhưng mà bây giờ cậu cũng mất. Thế là với cậu bảo là kiểu như là mama kiểu richtig cái mát ấy, nhưng mà là ở lại như thế là tốt, kiểu ở nhà khổ ấy. Nhưng mà mama đã xác định là unbedingt là phải ở lại, chứ mà mama không thể kiểu về đi làm đã thấy trốn chỉ đấy không. Nhưng mà nó bảo sang được bên Đức nó mà sẽ bằng mọi giá thì nó mà phải ở lại ấy.
You learn that work means survival, that worth is measured in effort. As for my dad, the work in the kitchen is but a shadow of the endurance poured into factories, farms, and the fields. Labor that feeds the world but remains hidden in the shadow. I carry that weight with me, imprinted onto my shoulders, and following me with each step, as well as the silences I inherited and the things left unspoken.
Lúc xúc. Ok.
As for my mom, the work in the kitchen reveals just a fraction of the unseen, unspoken labor of making spaces livable.
Lúc mà đổ vào, đổ nhẹ nhẹ, nó xong phải khoảng mấy phút xong bắt đầu mới đảo lên. Đảo nhẹ nhẹ thì nó không vỡ cái gạch này. Mama rửa đây.
Restoring order to the chaos others leave behind.
Cái bát đấy mà vỡ thì xa đời.
I rinse my hands. The sand stays on my fingers. I grew up hearing, don't waste anything, take nothing for granted. If you work hard, you'll be valued. If you're useful, you'll be wanted. And if you're generous, you'll be loved.
Xong rồi đấy.
Nó có hoa nhiều.
Không ăn thử một muối thôi đây, nó cho cái này bốc những chấm đây thì con biết được là nó không.
Cái đó chứ.
A ở nhà bố mẹ, con mãi là con gái nhỏ, luôn là chị cả, vừa trong bếp, vừa ngoài bếp. Doch ich sehe was du nicht siehst. Und das sind Übersetzen, mit Behörden sprechen, Telefonate führen, die deutsche Bürokratie überwinden.
Này, cho tí nào. Biết sao luôn. Được chưa? Cực cả luôn. Đấy.
And one day, all of this will be nothing but a memory. One that lives not in words, but in silent acceptance.
Hay đi may đồ, ví dụ đi làm nó có tiền đấy. Bắt đầu lại đi ra may.
This was a wonderful piece by Honey T. It's longer. You can listen to it fully on our repository that's going to be uploaded. For me, this brings many memories of family work, care work, migration, and the ways of listening that we've grown up with in this context. How listening can be also a way of keeping the atmosphere of a space, making community, maintaining a family, making a space livable, as she mentions. And it's also intertwined with gender, class, and racialization, of course. For me, it was really important to include this block of forms of listening, because I think to consider the intersectional ways in which listening labor forms, it's something that should be more studied, or I believe it has been a bit overlooked by focusing on the separate aspects of it. And I still believe personally that the class aspect of sound and listening experience has been a little bit overlooked. From the listening conditions themselves and factors, I think that from the variety of submissions, we can see that there are different factors that create this sense of listening under pressure or listening constraint. Like intensity, for example, can be high volume, can be noise, exposure, can also be repetition, the loops. It can also be the overlapping or cacophony with the different voices talking on top of each other's, or different type of sounds. Two musicians playing on the same street, one person wrote on their submission. Also to be considered is the type of attention that listening means in this context. For example, in my case, when I was working as a gallery guard, my listening was a surveillance listening. This was the listening that helped me to earn my living. Or we also have like technical modes of listening as expertise, as Catherine Wechterfield would say, the sonic skills, no? Or Jonathan Stern also, who works on audio techniques. And just seeing these two last submissions, I just think it's also important to mention that not all the submissions were complained about intense conditions of work or sensory strain. There were a couple of submissions in which people mentioned that they don't really care about the sounds, that they were not super attentive, or on the contrary, that those sounds made them shift their attention into the present.
Shan Liu works in a university where a piano sits in a communal space.
These are the ones you say you've got tech.
So they might work at least. I mean, yeah, we usually it's almost 10. Yeah. So you get the further. You get to see what they're rolling.
I sometimes encounter students playing the piano while walking past the space during work time. The sound is occasional and running. Also in the recording is the chatter of my colleagues. These random sounds always make me pause my footstep and take a moment to immerse and delve into the environment to focus on the present.
Sasha, a former oceanographer, brings another sonic working environment into focus. Field work at sea. Sounds that can both exhaust and calm.
But yeah, it's an interesting exercise. When I think of listening otherwise, I perceive that sometimes we go too far. We go too far and with these like new sonic materialisms that are super interesting and promising. I also think that sometimes we miss what is right next to us. Listening practices that are forgotten because are normalized. So, of course, it's an speculative or imaginary, exciting exercise to imagine how this alien listen, or a robot or AI would listen, or even the rock in the park, which I think is fascinating, and probably an indigenous person from the area would know more when I'm talking about Peru, for example, no, in the Amazon. For example, in a urban context, these day-to-day ways of listening from the person who bakes the bread, or the person who eats the cashier, the person on the supermarket that scans all the products and has to listen to this beep, beep, beep with this same 15-song playlist on their back. So I think this kind of infraordinary listening, which is always like the infrastructure of all the services in our day-to-day life, have been forgotten, and there's so much knowledge and so much wisdom there. That's basically one of the points of this project. And just to close, I just wanted to share out loud that you can find this distinction in the text, the framing text that is available in the Word Listening Project webpage. But I think that what this project showed me is to distinguish a lived condition that we all have lived, which I call precarious listening. It's basically what we perceive as exhaustion, overload, repetition, sensory strain that wears our ears down, that makes us feel constrained and under pressure. And it has to do with sonic demands and social demands of late capitalism, and turn it around into precarious listening, into a critical practice, a political practice in which we share these conditions and we reflect on them not only theoretically, but we also organize ourselves and understand how other people listen, create empathy, bonds, and also common causes, for example, in workplaces. How important it is to share these experiences, to pay attention to that exhaustion, and also how the sounds are distributed differently across workplaces. This can make it easier to see the power relations that organize what is heard and endured, and it can lead us towards critique, awareness, and contestation. Yeah, I just wanted to thank all these wonderful people. I just wanted to mention that it was a funny coincidence that during the broadcast, I got sick. In the end, because I didn't have voice, I asked a friend who I always mocked in a nice way, that he had a broadcaster voice, and asked him to come to my place to cook. And then I told him, hey, it's a trap. I want to record your voice. I will pay you symbolically. I will make you dinner. And he's the co-host, Manuel Krause. But I think this is a nice outcome of this project, because it was social since the beginning to the end. So I think this is really beautiful, and I wanted to share that and thank everyone who was part of the project. Thank you all for listening, for being here, for joining. And I want to say also that the call is still open. We hope that it stays open for a while. We don't know how long, but the idea is to get more submissions, different type of submissions. Can be field recordings, testimonies, notes. Every time that you are mad with your boss, you can write a complaint, a rant. That's welcome, absolutely. That's basically it from my part.
And thank you so much for the presentation. It was really great, and I'm excited to see where this goes. So yeah, so everybody that's on, please also spread the word. We have a Substack and the Instagram, and a little bit of traction on those platforms goes a long way as we continue to announce the openings of events, and we'll sort of like reshare that this is still an ongoing project that we're really excited about. So thank you again for a great presentation, Ale. Thank you everybody for being here. It's really wonderful to see you all, and I look forward to seeing everybody again.